What's up, guys, and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm answering a question submitted by a viewer in the comments. If you guys have any questions that you'd like me to answer, please ask them in the comments down below. The comments are actually really helpful for this channel because one of the biggest things with making uploads this often is I don't know what the hell to talk about. So if you guys have questions you'd like me to answer, please leave them down below. But the topic of this video in specific is how to transition from flipping trainers to live blades, right? Flipping trainers versus flipping live blades is a different thing, and specifically the difference is, well, the blade. You know, on a live blade there is a legitimate risk of getting cut. Whereas on a trainer, there's almost none. You know, trainers, they can pinch you, they can cause you to bleed because of that, but in general, trainers don't pose much of a risk to you or the people around you, whereas live blades do. So, how do you transition from flipping trainers to live blades if that's what you want to do? Well, there's multiple steps to this process. First of all, you have to temper your expectations, right? When I say flipping trainers to flipping live blades, there is a sort of like stigma that if you flip trainers now and then you transition to live blades, you'll be able to flip live blades. And that's just simply not true. What I should be saying is how to transition between flipping different knives, right? Because every balisong flips differently. And so if you have a trainer or a live blade and you're trying to transition between them, you have to learn to flip the new knife. It's not that you're learning how to flip live blades in general, though that is a hump to get over in terms of the fear factor of getting cut. What you are learning is to flip the new knife that you have. You know, even if you're transitioning from a crack-a-rackin' trainer to a crack-a-rackin' live blade, there's still going to be slight differences in how they flip that are going to lead to you needing to get comfortable to the new experience of the new knife. But say you go from, like, on a glider Arctic, that's what you've been training on, and suddenly you buy a crack-a-rackin'. Well, if you learn to flip on the crack-a-rackin', it doesn't mean that you can suddenly flip any live blade somebody hands you. If somebody hands you a Stitch Steel Alien or an ELB Pro Flipper, that's going to flip completely differently than, you know, your crack-a-rackin', and so that's going to be a completely new experience, and you're going to have to relearn how to flip that knife. So the first step here is to temper your expectations. There is no such thing as learning to flip live blades, just learning to flip a different knife, right? So that's step one. Step two is going to be getting over the fear factor of a live blade. Okay, so this is done in multiple stages. The first stage is on your trainer, you need to establish, so before we even get into this, I guess the main thing to say is you should decide whether or not you even want to flip live blades, right? Because live blades do carry an inherent risk factor with them. But on top of that, there's no real reason to flip them unless that's truly what you want to do. For some people, flipping live blades is, you know, what they would like to do. But if you're being pressured by the people around you to flip live blades, there's no reason to give up your trainers and go to a live blade unless that's like your actual prerogative. So just telling you that right now, don't let people pressure you into flipping live blades if you don't really want to. You should want to flip live blades out of your own merit. You should want to flip them because you want to, not because somebody else wants you to. Anyways, the main thing then that you need to do is get over the fear, and that happens in multiple parts. So the first part of getting over your fear is pretending that your trainer is a live blade. Okay, so you need to treat the knife that you're utilizing as a trainer as though it has a sharp blade like this, okay? When you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to condition yourself, right, to avoid the bite handle more. And you're going to condition yourself to make sure that you don't cut yourself on your trainer more often, okay? The way that you do this is by either having, you know, a trainer that has a bite handle marker, which will make it a lot easier to keep track of whether or not you've gotten hit with it, but also flipping more slowly with your trainer, taking it and kind of taking your time and getting used to it flipping and getting used to avoiding the bite handle. Say you're doing tricks with the bite handle, you gotta really focus on your wrist pass because, you know, on a trainer, if you mess up the wrist pass and the blade touches you, well, that's not a problem. But on a knife like this, you know, if I mess up my wrist pass, I'm going to get cut. And so you need to be very comfortable with things like the wrist pass, so that you know how not to get cut. Alongside that, then comes the actual getting over the fear when you pick up the bladed knife itself. Now, this can be done multiple ways. You could try taping your knife. Obviously, a lot of people do that, where they convert their live bladed knife into a trainer by adding tape. But personally, I wouldn't suggest that. And the main reason for this is there is a genuine step of getting over the fear of being cut by your knife. What you'll realize, or at least the way that I experienced this, was when I first started trying to flip live blade knives, the blade sort of feels hot, if that makes sense. Like, I think to me, in my head, it was like, if I even touch this blade, I'm gonna get cut. But as you can see right now, I can put my finger on the blade and it does not cut me. All right, I'm not getting cut. The reason for that is because this blade is just a thing. It's not a special hot thing that'll instantly cut through your skin no matter what happens. There are rules to how blades work. And yeah, you can have like a razor sharp blade that might, cut you if you just touch it, but most blades aren't gonna be that stinking sharp, especially if you use them on a regular basis. Instead, what you've got going on is most blades require some sort of motion across them. So if you just touch a blade directly, it's not going to harm you. But if you were to put your finger onto it and drag it across the blade, then it would cut into you, right? And so that's the first step in understanding how live blades work. They're not some magical thing where if it even touches you slightly, you're going to get this horrific cut. In most instances, the blade isn't going to cut you, even if it barely touches you. Like, say you do mess up your wrist pass, well, the blade's coming in at an angle like this, okay? And so if you're doing a wrist pass and the blade just barely touches you, right? It's not actually going to cut you, because unless there's a lot of force behind the blade touching you and you really mess up the wrist pass, if you barely mess it up and it just kind of touches you, A, the blade isn't sliding against your finger, so there's no force there to cut into you. And then B, it's really just kind of pressing against your skin for a moment. So in most cases, even if you mess up your wrist pass, you're not really gonna get cut. And then the third step in getting over the fear of getting cut is getting cut. I know, it's weird, but in general, what you'll find flipping balisongs is that actually they're not that dangerous to the user. The biggest risk that you can have when flipping a balisong is less in the middle of tricks. In the middle of most tricks, the worst injury you're going to give yourself is something like a ring of death, where say you, or a ring of shame, where you do like a chaplain with the bite handle. And what that'll do is that'll normally cut moderately deep into your skin all the way around your finger. But A, if you've been practicing as though you've had a live blade the whole time and respecting it and making sure that you keep track of which handle's the bite handle and which one's the safe handle while you're flipping, a ring of shame shouldn't be something that you really have to worry about if you've practiced enough. And then B, the other thing is doing aerials. There's a likelihood of you catching the knife at the wrong time and then stabbing yourself like that. Both of these sound very painful and dangerous, but actually at the end of the day, they're really not that bad, especially for somebody who's experienced some of these things. I poke myself on a regular basis and it's fine. 90% of the time when I get myself with my knives, it doesn't even draw blood. It's just like, oh, and then you're on to the next thing. And that process of getting cut and realizing that when you do get cut, 98% of the time, it's not actually going to be serious at all, is really going to help you. Because what will mess you up when you're transitioning from a trainer to a live blade is the fear of that blade, right? Your fear is what's going to drive your inability to flip it. If you are uncomfortable with a knife, you're not going to be able to flip it well, and so that's going to lead to you not being nearly as agile and nimble as you normally are with your trainer. Instead, you're going to be, really rickety, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to try to do this aerial, and so you're going to like throw it, but you're not really going to give it the gas that it needs. Like, to pull off an aerial, right, you got to throw it. You got to like legit, give that knife some gas and it'll do it. And so if you're here afraid and you like kind of do that, well, that's going to lead to you messing up the aerial. That's going to lead to you poking yourself in the hand. If you're like, I don't know, if you're afraid of the blade, you're going to get cut. Whereas if you're not afraid of the blade, it's very funny. Suddenly you're a lot less likely to get cut. And the whole reason behind that is because your comfort level is, you know, directly correlated to how good you are in terms of your performance while flipping. Okay, so the dream here really is just to be as comfortable as possible with the idea of the live blade, and you'll eventually, you know, come to an understanding with the blade that it's not trying to cut you, and you're not trying to cut yourself. Therefore, 90% of the time, you're not going to get cut. And the other 2% of the time, when you do get cut, usually it's not going to be very bad at all. Usually it's going to be a minor nick or something. People have asked me to talk about my worst cut for a long time, and honestly, it's not that exciting. My worst cut is, you can see there's a very small sort of bump on my finger here. You can see it's like right there, because it's completely healed. There's just a very small bump that's like scar tissue. That came from when I was doing a trick with my Kershaw Lucha, and the knife ended up sliding and slicing through my finger like that. And do you know what I did to solve it? It was bleeding everywhere. It was really bad, but you know what I did? I put a paper towel on it, and I pressed it down for a while until the bleeding subsided, and then I went in with super glue, and I super glued it, and then I was good. Super glue, for those that don't know, is a medically usable sealant. You know, it's perfectly good to use on open wounds because it's completely, like, sterile. And so I just super glued it closed, and, you know, now it's almost completely vanished. I have a feeling in like less than a year from now, there will be nothing left of this little bump that's on my finger. And so, yeah, that hurt at the time, but that's the worst cut that I've experienced. And I own multiple razor sharp knives that I flip on a regular basis. And this is the worst thing that I've had happen to me, right? Like, that's not bad. You know, there are people who do experience bad cuts, but generally speaking, the main place where you experience bad cuts is during drops, right? Dropping your knife is going to be the place where you experience most of your cuts. But here's the secret. The reason people experience cuts when they drop their knife isn't because of the dropping of the knife itself. It's because they don't want to drop the knife. And if you don't want to drop your knife, well, you're going to try to catch it, right? And that is where the problem lies. Because if you do a trick and you mess it up, that knife is just spinning out of control. And so if you try to go in there and grab it, right? Because with your trainer, you've most likely taught yourself, I'm going to grab the trainer before it hits the ground so I don't have to bend down and pick it up later. Or maybe you care a lot about your trainer and the way that it looks, and you're trying not to drop it onto concrete or whatever. And so you're going to try to catch it out of the air before it can hit the ground. That is the largest possible no-no with your live bladed balisong. People will try to like catch it with their leg, you know, they'll like put their leg out for their trainer to like help it kind of hit the ground softer or direct it, or maybe you're like kick it away from the concrete or something. You know, there's multiple things that you might do out of instinct to help catch your knife. But all of them you have to completely let go of when you start flipping live blades. You cannot attempt to catch this, because that is how you're really going to get hurt. You going in, you know, because when you're moving to catch something, A, it's moving out of control, and B, you're trying to be as quick as possible because you're fighting the acceleration of gravity. You know, so you have to be moving at least 9.8 meters per second squared to grab that thing. And so you're probably going to be moving substantially faster than that. And so what'll happen is you're going to be moving your hand with high acceleration at a live blade, and if it hits you wrong, like if it hits you like this, well, suddenly you're pushing the blade across your hand, and that's what's going to cause it to cut in. Or you're going to hit it, you know, directly on the point, and that's what's going to cause you to have a big cut. So that is where the injury comes from. It comes from you trying to catch your blade as it falls, and not from something you're doing that's like a trick that's controlled. Most controlled tricks aren't actually going to end up hurting you that badly. They're just going to like poke you a little bit or maybe give you a small cut. Whereas if you try to catch that knife while it's in free fall, you are going to regret it. So that's the 3 tips here, right? The first tip is understand that just because you know how to flip one live bladed knife doesn't mean that you know how to flip all of them. The transition point is not between, you know, trainers and live blades. The transition point is from knife to knife. Every single knife flips slightly differently, which is, you know, one of the reasons I have so many in my collection is so I can, you know, have a bunch of different experiences in terms of flipping knives. But you have to understand that just because you picked something up that's a live blade doesn't mean you can suddenly flip every other live blade. Every single knife you try will require its own, you know, period of getting used to. And that's okay. That's totally normal. Then the second part is getting over the fear of the blade. The fear of the blade is definitely one of the worst contenders in terms of, getting you cut, because what's going to happen is you'll be trying to do some kind of a complicated trick, and then you're going to hesitate, and then you're going to drop it, and then you're going to try to grab it or whatever, or it's just going to fly right into you. And nobody wants that. So you got to get over the fear of the blade. How do you do that? A, pretend that your trainer is a real knife and learn based off of that. And B, when you get your knife that is a real blade, flip it slowly. Do slow stuff. Say, you first get it, just do the basic opening, right? Do that until you get used to it. Do some fans or whatever, but don't ever let go of the safe handle. That's the way to get used to the knife, because you're going to start getting used to the momentum, right? So you're just going to do tricks that are simple and easy, and you can just repeat them over and over with your new live bladed knife. And then eventually you can start doing rollovers that you're comfortable with. And then once you've gotten rollovers that you're comfortable with, then you'll pop an aerial and see how nice it feels. And suddenly the knife will become way more natural to you and way more normal for you to flip. And instead of you thinking constantly about how dangerous that blade is, suddenly you're just flipping, right? That's the difference, is that if you are thinking of it in terms of going from a trainer to a live blade, you're thinking about the blade. And if you're thinking about the blade, you're probably fearing the blade. If you fear the blade, you're going to hesitate, you're not going to throw the knife hard enough, and you're going to hurt yourself. Whereas if you're not thinking about the blade, if you spend enough time to get used to whatever you're flipping, you're just going to flip it, and that'll be normal. And so that's a big deal, is getting over that fear. And then the final thing is, don't try to catch your live blade knife when you drop it, right? That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to cause injury. People, dropping the knife and it falling directly on their leg or whatever. If you definitely, I suggest this because I've kind of gotten used to, when I drop a knife, I have like a second sense of, I know if it's going to go towards my left or my right foot, and I'll just pull my foot out of the way before the knife even hits the ground, right? You can probably see it in a couple of my Will Hirsch Flips videos where I do genuinely drop the knife at my foot, and I just pull it out of the way in time. That comes from, before I ever did Balisongs, I did knife juggling, like fixed blade knife juggling, and I dropped them all the time, and so I had to get used to pulling my feet out of the way. But if you're flipping a live blade, don't do what I do sometimes on these videos and flip barefoot. Never flip barefoot, because if you drop this knife on your foot, it's going to be falling from all the way up here and accelerating the whole way, and it's going to hit your foot pretty damn hard, and it's probably going to go through your foot. So shoes are awesome. They keep you very safe. Same thing with also flipping with shorts. Flipping with pants is generally a better idea than flipping with shorts, because flipping with shorts, I've seen, they drop the knife and it slides down their leg, and suddenly you have this huge gash opened in your leg, and that's no good. So generally speaking, you get better at messing up the more you flip too. So not only will you be dropping your knife less, but when you do drop your knife, you'll do it in a more intentional way, where you'll drop it in a way where it goes away from you instead of towards you, right? The better you get at flipping means the better you get at messing up. And so eventually you'll be able to kind of direct your mess ups in general away from you. Every once in a while they will come at you, and you can't control that, but more often than not, you can control them to go away from you. And, that's another step. But as I said, in all of this, the main thing to combat is fear. You need to make sure that the live blade is a normal thing to you. You can't think of it as a live blade compared to your trainer. You just have to think of both of them as a balisong. Because at the end of the day, that's all they are. And if you fear the live blade will hurt you. But if you are careful and you respect it, the live blade will serve you very well and be a really cool tool. Wow. It'll be a really cool tool that you can keep in your pocket and show off to your friends and use all the time, and, just be a really nice thing. So yeah, that's my whole shtick on how to get into flipping live bladed balisongs. I hope you maybe learned something today. If you have anybody that's looking to get into flipping live bladed balisongs, consider showing them this video, But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Peace.